What has been the most influential era of your life?
Most influential era?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose the most, and I don't know if you call it influential, but the critical period was towards the end of my first undergraduate degree, when I decided to try to make the switch into physics. And there were many barriers, and many people who helped me overcome those barriers. And had any one of them that not worked, I would not be doing physics today.
Well, what were some barriers?
Okay. So I'm coming up to the end of a 4-year degree in the Oxford grades, that's
Right.
critical classics. So I decide I would like to. A complicated process of thought, which is itself, perhaps quite interesting. I decided that it was physics that I wanted to end up in. So I'd have to do a second undergraduate degree in physics. Problem number one, is any university going to accept me? Well, fortunately, I was at Oxford, and there was a young tutor in theoretical physics who they just employed actually at that point, David Green. And so he was the first port of call with whom I approached to discuss this. And what he did was he sent me away for the summer. This was at the beginning of the summer vacation, and he sent me away for the vacation to read a few chapters of a really beautiful text, a beautiful book, What is Mathematics by Courant and Robbins. I don't know if you know it, but it's a really beautiful book. I strongly recommend it. And when I came back at the end of the vacation, he basically gave me a sort of little examination on the content of the chapters I'd written, and on the basis of my answers, agreed that it was not complete nonsense for me to go on and try to do a degree in physics. So that was the academic barrier overcome. And had I not been accepted elsewhere, I could have gone on at my original college, which was Balliol. Problem number two, who's going to support me?
Right.
It turned out that there was another college in Oxford, Merton College, which had a scholarship, which was usually given for postgraduate work, but in my case, they were prepared to tweak the conditions a little to make it available to me to do a second undergraduate degree. There's actually a complication there, because the original scholarship had been based on a donation by an alumnus, and the year of graduation of this alumnus was somewhere, I think, around 1850 or whatever, when political correctness was not quite what it is today. And so it was specified in the conditions for this scholarship that the holder, the recipient of the scholarship, should be an Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Well, I am half Irish, and I am certainly not a Protestant. I was brought up as a Catholic. So very fortunately, of course, we're talking now about 1959, and by that time, of course, the college had realised that this is not, at least in the modern spirit, and so they'd actually made a nice arrangement by which, if they couldn't change the conditions of it was just sort of built in concrete.
Right.
So they said, well, if if we get a candidate who we would like to accept and who satisfies these conditions, then we will accept him. But if and we'll use the money from this donation. If we get a candidate who would otherwise have been accepted but doesn't fulfil these conditions, we'll just put up our own money for it. And so that's what they did for me. Incidentally, I think the original donor had never bothered to specify that the holder should be male, and therefore I suspect there are quite a few Anglo-Saxon Protestant women who now
Right.
are enjoying this. He'd probably be turning in his grave, I imagine. Anyway, so that was the academic, the financial problem overcome. The third problem, the most serious, was the military draft.
Oh.
Britain had the military draft during World War II and continued it for some years thereafter. And I had managed to defer being drafted when I first went up to Oxford in 1955, and that was quite a regular thing. People did defer military service to do a first degree.
Right.
But now I'm coming up to the end of this first degree, and I'm going to go to my military draft board and say, look, you guys, you've deferred me for 4 years, but I'd really rather like you to defer me for another 2 years so that I can do this second undergraduate degree. Well, it was known that 1959 was in fact the last year of the draft intake.
Oh.
So if I were to defer, then
never
never do it at all. So they were going to get pretty wise to that, and they were certainly going to turn me down. Right? That's where General Sergei Korolev saved me. You probably almost certainly don't know who General Sergei Korolev is. To give you a clue, he spent most of his life anonymously to avoid being assassinated by the CIA. He was the person who was in charge of the Soviet Union's space program throughout the 40s and 50s. And so it was he and his team who launched Sputnik in the fall of 1957. Okay? So you have this thing going pop across the sky. Everyone in the world knows that this this spaceship is first ever Earth satellite. Sorry,
Right.
first satellite. First ever Earth satellite has not been put up by the US or by the UK. It's been put up by the Soviet Union. All the pundits and politicians and journalists start crying out, how come that the Soviet Union has got ahead of us in this incredibly important technological area? Well, the answer came back fairly quickly. It's because we've encouraged all our best and brightest to do useless things like classics and not useful things like physics. And so this huge sort of sociological wave, if you like, which of encouragement of people to who were trained in the on the humanities side to switch to a scientific subject, and lots of scholarships and so forth became available for that. And I was able just to ride the crest of this wave. And most importantly, it meant that my tutors could go to the draft board and say, look, you guys, you want scientists, right? Well, here you've got someone who wants to become a scientist. Much more useful to you doing a second degree than bashing the parade ground. So that's how I got out of the military draft. And so those were really the three main obstacles. But of course, then I had to compact things. I had to complete my undergraduate physics degree in a couple of years rather than the standard 3 years without having any real high school background for it. So that was a bit of gave me a bit of mental indigestion, to put it mildly.
So how did this general save you, and why was he being persecuted?
Sorry?
So why was the general in particular like? How did someone like the general help you from getting drafted? So I'm assuming there were other people too.
Because had it not been for Sputnik, I almost certainly would have had to do my military service. And it was only that wave, sort of sociological wave of opinion that people, the brightest people ought to be encouraged to do science and not.
Right, so it was the indirect effect.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought he did something for you, like directly.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't know me personally, and vice versa. But if I ever get through the pearly gates, he's one of the first people I'm going to want to thank.
Got it. It was more like they launched Sputnik, and then everyone needed to become scientists because of that.
Right, and then they started giving more importance to the people who wanted to pursue science, and
And so they let you stay over a little.
It's pretty interesting.
Wow. I mean, it's a series of events that
Fortunate events.
one of them would have been cut off and a whole different life.
Yeah, right. Any one of those things could have gone wrong, and many other minor things as well. Yeah.
It's fascinating.